Welcome to Supercharged with Jordan Samuel Fleming, your weekly podcast dedicated to what your business can achieve when it's powered by Podio. Join us each week as we learn from the top Podio partners in the world, as we investigate system integrations and add-ons and hear from real business owners who have implemented Podio into their business. Now, join Jordan Samuel Fleming, CEO of Smartphone, for this week's episode.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Supercharged. I'm your host, Jordan Samuel Fleming, here to talk all about the awesome power of workflow and automation when your business is powered by Podio. What an episode we have this week. Really a fun one. The guests today are Joel Ordesky, returning champion, Podio Partner. You'll probably have heard him on the podcast many times, and he brought along a client of his, William Lindhal from CPT, the CPT Institute. They are a charity in the US, and William gives a great summary of just how many people they help and how they do that across the country. And I love this episode. I love this episode for a couple of reasons. Number one, it shows what a great relationship you can have with a Podio partner and how much value that relationship can bring you, right? How much value into how you actually build your Podio, how you implement it, how you get it fully functioning within your business. It's very clear that William talks with glowing terms about Joel, but about that relationship, about how well they've worked together, and how much Joel has helped their organization grow their business processes using Podio. And I think that's a really great thing to see, because it really, I was a Podio partner for over 10 years, and I know that relationship is critical, and it can be so valuable. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think this is a really great case study for a business, kind of growing its software, finding Podio, and kind of finding Nirvana. I mean, you were going to hear in this episode how they went from sort of Salesforce environment that got too expensive, and they built their own sort of thing in an extranet internet sort of function, and that wasn't quite right. And then they found Podio and Joel, and really that's 4 and some odd years ago, and it's they've been kind of going ever since. And you really, they've really sort of skyrocketed. And it's a great case study of how a business, and a complex business, a business with a lot of regulations, a lot of moving parts, can really build their whole kind of business process inside of Podio, how Podio can be that central hub of how the business works. Containing the data, containing the employees, being able to collaborate, and being able to seamlessly integrate various elements. I mean, we talk about share file without question. We also talk about smartphone because they're a smartphone user. It's just a great example. So if you're a business out there, wondering if Podio is the right step forward, wondering how much Podio can do for your business, this is such a great podcast to listen to. As always, please, before I get into the podcast, go to iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spot, wherever you listen. Give us a like, give us a review. It really helps boost up the visibility of the podcast to make sure that we are spreading the gospel of Podio as wide as possible. And of course, I'm always looking to speak to new people. I'm fascinated to hear everybody's stories about how they work with Podio. So please do pop over to wearegamechangers.com and go ahead and submit yourself in for a guest. While you're there, take a look at the masterclass. Really helps you supercharge your Podio, particularly if you're relatively new to it. Shows you all sorts of cool things you can do with Podio, and new videos get launched every week. All right, enough of me. Let's hear from Joel and Will. And it's pretty informal as well. So I will try not to curse. Joel will know that is not an easy thing for me to do. But I will do my best, my level best. So anyway, Will and Joel, welcome to the podcast. Joel's obviously a returning champion. Will is a brand new champion to the podcast. Why don't you guys, Will, maybe you can kick off by giving us a little background on the company so that we know where we're playing with?
Yes. Yeah. I'm the executive director of a nationwide nonprofit trustee that protects people that are catastrophically injured who are no longer able to earn a living. So basically, we administer trust accounts in 48 out of 50 states, and the backbone of our organization is Citrix Podio.
Excellent. And now, as I understand it, so you had your business in another platform before Podio, and then made a transition. So I guess, and that's something that I see not only when I was a Podio partner, that I do that a lot, but I see it all the time of people moving from other systems into Podio. What was the impetus, and what was the transition, the initial transition like?
A nightmare. Just to be blunt, we're about 26 years old. So the first 10 years we were primarily Salesforce. And the more complex and the more diverse the company got, the more the bill went higher and higher and higher and higher, to the point where we got to about 10,000 a month. No big deal. Then we transitioned to a private extranet host provider, which is, I'm not sure they're even still in business. So we basically were on a SQL server and a private extranet system. And the problem we have is that we do a lot of stuff with APIs that connect to, say, banks or other institutions. And we needed something that had to have a lot more customization and flexibility on the fly that wouldn't result in adding on a plethora of subscription services that would then price out we're a charity, we're a nationwide charity. So costs are a big issue for us. We try to be the lowest cost provider in the country. So basically, most other commercial platforms, I think you tend to, as you scale them, they tend to become cost prohibitive, at least in the line of work I'm in.
And cost prohibitive, and also the flexibility of being able to, to rapidly change around, make modifications, is something that most other platforms, or if you're building something in an environment like an extranet environment, you're not going to have a rapid ability to do that nearly as easy. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, not only is that correct, the most powerful feature of using Podio for us was that you could emulate and replicate the functionality of most other third-party options in the market in a much more efficient, non-cost, without rising costs. So we were able to emulate a prior trust administration system that spent $500,000 building. And literally, Joel and I re-emulated it and reconstructed it and redesigned it in Podio, probably within a few weeks, our initial launch, I think, of being able to use it within a few weeks. And you're talking about something that we spent, years developing, emulating the whole exact structure. And then that kind of got out of control in the sense that now we have like 90 something apps that we've built. So we were able to customize the Podio platform to the diversification is tremendous relationship to HR, data resources, knowledge databases, authorization systems, auditing. I mean, it really exponentially changed the power of what we could do in our system.
And let me actually follow up on something you just said, because I think it bears repeating. And if people listen to this and are kind of wondering or getting into Podio, you're talking about these different, whether it's HR or whatever, but where you've got other systems, in particular, where you're looking at other capabilities, a lot of people end up having to link together multiple platforms, multiple services, multiple online software applications, whatever. Not only can that become cost prohibitive, whereas building it in Podio contains it, but it also means that the data is centralized and able to be accessed from every point of the business. And I think that's a really important part of this. Did you find that improved a lot by building Podio?
What you just referenced, I call, is my experience in the last, I've owned multiple companies, and I've been doing, I used to do software stuff myself many, many years ago. Now I'm inept. But to be honest, the real issue in today's modern technology environment is the cobbling together, right? The if, then that doesn't quite work what you think it would. A lot of integration technologies are not refined enough. So we were able to take existing functionality in all kinds of third-party options and emulate the similar exact type of structure without a subscription fee and without cobbling together another API interface into replicating that same functionality within Podio. So it allowed us to surrender and drop a lot of other subscription services that would have had a certain functionality that we could eventually emulate in CT. The problem is you can't do it without a powerful partner. Like many people who have met Joel think he works for me, but he doesn't. Joel's been supporting us for ages, and I can't thank him enough. But I think having a strong Podio partner is paramount, because the average consumer or business person doesn't really understand how to make the technology do what they're asking. They know what they want, but they have no idea what goes into making it actually happen. And I thought that someday we would slowly wean ourselves of our private guru.
Of your Joel addiction.
No way. If anything, it's what we found out is that this constant ability to enhance, replicate, and expand to the capacity where he has such an intimate knowledge of our operations. I can't imagine my life without him. He's not allowed to ever not work for us. It's just prohibited. It's I'll personally have him hunted down and super glue him to a chair.
Well, that mirrors, I mean, I will say that I 100% agree, and it mirrors my experience when I was a consultant. You develop, a good consultant, is an invaluable resource because they know your business, but also you know what you want. You don't really want to have to know how to execute it in Podio. Like, why should your team have to do that? How did you end up finding Joel? Did you trip and fall into him, or?
Just not that this is applicable to this podcast, but I'm legally blind. So the first time I saw Joel without his headset on his head, I didn't even recognize him. He walked right up to me and introduced himself. And I've been working with him for years. I didn't even recognize that guy. Now, that said, I actually don't remember how I met Joel.
It was a standard partner request that came through the Citrix Podio Partner platform, and it was about 4 years ago. I looked it up, Will. It was March of 2018, and it's been we've done 1,000 hours of work together as of the last time the last billing period, and I looked it up, and I have not yet exceeded the cost of 1 year of your extranet.
No, that is the truth. I think this is a hidden gem. I hope the industry can understand. I think Citrix Podio's biggest challenge is for people to understand the capacity of integration and the augmentation of tying together things like smartphone and your video conferencing software, and sharing even an individual record or project is something that just is not that common in the CRM platform world. So the diversification of this platform is still astounding to me. And I used to be a MCSE guy. I used to develop software like this for a long time ago. So I'm still impressed at how we can keep augmenting and triggering and manipulating and adjusting it without having to keep adding more fees and more external services.
That's a very succinct way of putting the benefit of Podio. And also, I think one question it comes to mind, because when you first, obviously you had these other, you Salesforce, and then you had your own extranet, element. When you first got sort of into the Podio environment and started to shake the kind of kinks out of it, what did you find, if you can remember back to those kind of first weeks and months of Podio? Was there anything that stood out in a positive or a negative way that you've now kind of 4 years on, obviously won't matter to you, but is there anything that stood out to you as a new user?
It was a little hard to surrender to the will of Joel. So I had always been a developer and a person myself, and one thing I did to make Joel's life miserable is he could work really hard on something, and then I would tinker around and I'd break it for him. Just create work for him. So my frustration, I would say, about that people have to be careful about Podio is that it's very easy it seems easy because the fundamental way to manipulate stuff is fairly straightforward. But once you start setting up flows and start automating features, then you kind of have to turn off anybody's capacity to start making changes because they can undermine or break things down. But what is beautiful is I have a director of operations named Kate, and she works with Joel now exclusively. And now we have this ongoing tech ticket app that, of course, we developed in Podio, right? And it's a forever list. And when I say it's a forever list, we can continue to make enhancements every week. I mean, I bet there hasn't been 2 weeks gone by in CPT where Joel hasn't made a change that didn't enhance or better our business. And I don't think you can say that about any other software system. And Joel did not pay me to say that. I'm just saying literally, and I'll give you a very good example. We deal with people who are catastrophically injured and in a difficult, precarious situation. They can't make a living. So you can imagine we're responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars for other people. And having just triggers that send text messages to the cell phone, let them know if a request was approved or denied, or letting them log into a system and see where things are at. The scale of our capacity of what we've been able to accomplish has only gotten stronger and stronger and stronger over time. And I can absolutely not say that about any of the past experiences. Every time you have growing pains, it grounds your business to almost a halt as you had to make adaptations, or worse, shelf drop something and then restart something. And Joel's had the unfortunate experience of us having to migrate hundreds of accounts from one institution to another. So it's always difficult, but the fact that you have that constant scale and adaptability is just does not exist anywhere else. I don't know of any other platform that has this much flexibility.
100% agreed. Now you, I mean, obviously you mentioned sending a text message, but also you mentioned, having people be able to log in and see things. Is that, are you externalizing Podio data for that? Is that, or are you bringing them into Podio?
We've experimented with that, but people are always averse to anything new and different, and they're easily confused. So I just like that I can do that. So let's say I'm helping a law firm in Louisiana right now. I share an open project with them and can post everything, upload it there, and have them go to one link and constantly share a shared interface without me paying for a separate feed for that party. So that external license and integration to an external party doesn't cost extra money on Podio too. And that's very unusual. You're only paying for the seats you're using internal within your organization. You can integrate to outside third parties. We've even experimented with working with mass tort organizations where you can handle hundreds of accounts externally. So again, you're not going to be driving up all this cost when you need to pull in third parties on a project. And you can't say that about most of the programs. You're going to pay every time you add a person.
That was actually one of the reasons I moved over to Podio back in 2011 or something. I was using another system, and if I wanted to bring in an external developer just to share an idea on a project, not to hire them, but just to be like share a bit of stuff, I had to pay 150 pounds, because I was working in the UK at the point, per license. And I remember thinking, well, this is not gonna be good for a small business. If every time I've got a new designer who's doing a teeny bit of work, I got to chuck 150 quid a year at a license for them, I'm not going to be able to sustain it. And I went searching and found Podio back in the day when it looked a little different, quite a bit different now, but also back when Globiflow, or Citrix PWA as it is now, Globiflow was then Podio Flow. It was, first name was Podio Flow. And I remember when it launched and thinking, good Lord, what is this tool? And, but the trigger, the catalyst was actually the external user problem. And the fact that Podio gave me a scalable way of working with other people. So
no doubt.
We've also benefited with this implementation. Not only are we using mini apps for like the beneficiaries to be able to access their data, and we have used internal Podio share and workspace share as well. But one of the things that has been really huge is the ability to access data from other institutions. So we have at least 2 financial and soon to be 3 financial institutions that are sending us financial data on a regular basis through an API. So, in the one case in our primary financial institution where we are sending payments, there's a constant flow of balance information coming from the banking balance information and us sending requests. So, a lot of process that was being manually done. In fact, when I joined them, the financial institution, when I started this, there was a process where faxes were being sent and people were re-entering information from system to system to system outside of CPT's walls. Even the financial institution was having to fax data around to make these payments. Today, it's all done via API. The data is kept up to date. If we make a payment today, request today, then an API tells us tonight that that's been accepted. And then a day later, when the check clears or the ACH clears, it updates in the system. So we have a lot of access that way to do it. This has allowed the growth potentials and controlling of costs, of manpower costs, as well, by able to make a lot of these things happen in an automated sense. I asked one of the staff people today how much stuff comes in without them having to retype it all, and she said to me 70% of her stuff comes in today, in an automated way that she doesn't have to retype it.
And that's, when you scale that, that is make or break for an organization. That kind of automation, that kind of efficiency, where team members can be more efficient in their job because they're not having to do these very mundane processes that are taking up oodles of time and are soul destroying to do as well. Right? Nobody likes data entry. Nobody. Well, I'm sure somebody does, but
another thing that Podio does that saves our bacon is that I have a very litigious job, right? So routinely, when you're a trustee, it's the same as having a bullseye target on your back. So we have to report to courts, to government agencies, to state agencies. And having the ability to have a transactional history of every single change of a field and or data, and historically have that go back so far with so much depth. I think that's something that most people, I've never seen in any other program where we have that level of transparency of all interactions and or changes within an actual app or a data record. So imagine now if I get sued or subpoenaed, which is pretty common. We've never been successfully sued in 26 years, knock on wood. But my point is, our records have always been unbelievably thorough in the sense that, most times it's just dismissed. And most people don't realize that most CRMs, a lot of data records, as things change, there's not a clear delineated history going back in the comment section or activity section like they do in Podio of every single change someone made. So even if someone makes a mistake and fixes it, you get to see who made that mistake and who fixes it. And I can't understate this enough, because I think the whole problem is, a lot of times people can corrupt or damage records and or an app or a product or do something. You kind of can't operate within Podio without there being a trail. And that cannot be understated. There's many programs out there, even in the banking industry. We don't use one of our financial institutions we work with. We don't use their interface because it doesn't have a strong enough audit trail. Think about that.
100%. That makes perfect sense. And, I always used to say to people when I'd implement Podio, there's nowhere to hide in Podio. You can't hide. And that is from a management point of view, that's a blessing. But also, unless you're a complete dick, from an employee's point of view, it's a blessing as well, because you ultimately, you've got that safety net of, I can always know what happened. What did I screw up? And I can fix it now. Whereas, I used to, even this ability to, sometimes when you've got, you put a value into a number field and you get the wrong one, or you accidentally change it and you think, shit, what was the real one? And instead of me having to go, through different files to find it, I just look at the revision history and go, there it is. And that is a small thing, but can be a real big thing as well.
I think the only thing that I need, and poor Joel will be busy doing this for a long time, is I think the biggest problem in every business is human nature. So you can have all the best fields in the world, you can have the best systems, the best triggers, you can have the best flows, but fundamentally in my business, whenever somebody makes a mistake, I ask myself, could I have made that same mistake? And even if the data and stuff is present, the biggest value I see long-term for us in Podio is having triggers and mechanisms to overcome human nature mistakes. So for example, even though Joel will have an embedded history of the last 90 days worth of transactional histories on a trust account, I can't trust that the employee is actually looking at that thoroughly enough to look for trends or patterns that are inappropriate. So learning how to build triggers into like, okay, when was the last time somebody submitted something? Are they still alive? We do wellness checks. I take care of people that are catastrophically injured. I need to verify that they're still alive. I mean, it sounds terrible, but it's a fact. So I think a lot of things that the only thing that I hope will get better for us in Podio is having the right triggers and mechanisms to overcome the nature of a human being just to be rushed or in a hurry or not pay attention to something that actually is quite critical, but it's easy if you're rushing to miss it. And that's probably the only thing I see us constantly wanting to adapt to human error. So as we see errors that occur in the utilization of the apps, Joel usually comes back and says, well, I can just turn a trigger on to let them know, hey, look, it's been 3 months since you talked to this person. You might want to reach out. And Joel's pretty witty. I mean, we have some buttons that run certain scripts that pull in data from other apps and bring them together. And it's really cute because we'll look over into our comments section, say, the squirrels are hunting for all your nuts. And we're like, what? And really, that's just Joel put a comment in that when it's going to grab the data for these fields, says, hey, give me a chance. I sent the squirrels out. They're going to get all the nuts and they'll put them in your box. And it's great because, it sounds silly, but we have a daily thing or a week 2.0 where we pull in all the meetings and we're very regimented and scheduled. So he's able to pull everything in and you organize your whole week. And it's pulling all that data. You're not running around jumping from app to app to app. The other thing with Podio is we've fallen in love with it so much that Joel, what do you think our total number of apps are now?
God, I mean, there's about almost a dozen workspaces. That's 8, and there are. Yeah, you probably have about 90 apps. I mean, you have a lot of stuff. I mean, and we're constantly optimizing and rearranging, and the names get changed occasionally, and it gets refined. I mean, I think one of the beauties of the system is that there is no, oh, we're going to have to plan for this revision. It's going to show up in a version so you have an idea, and now it's going to take us 3 months before we can launch that version after it's gone through all this testing. I can literally make a change like in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and that change is immediately affecting everybody, down the line. So, I mean, sometimes things are complicated, like the wellness check that we've been working on. You get into it, it's a little complicated because it's not just, I'm looking so that we don't call people up and go, are you okay? When they've actually made a request, made a phone call, texted us, or done any of a number of activities. We don't want to call them just because when they've done one of those things. So there's about a half dozen factors that are being measured and then calculated, and then it makes a days since last event count. And then when we get that over 90, then it's flagged to an app they call Matters to actually have a human. And in fact, we're not even we went one farther. We're not going to have a human immediately. That's going to send an email that's going to request them to either fill out a survey or to make an appointment to talk to us via Calendly, which again, the API pulls it straight back in. And if they do those things, then the wellness check dates will reset themselves. And if they don't, then someone's ultimately, after 2 attempts, the third attempt will be someone getting on the phone.
It flags them up.
Yeah.
Okay, hands up who's using Podio for real estate and they don't want more leads. Nobody. You want more leads closed? Well, check out Smartphone for Podio, the only phone system fully built for Citrix Podio. With an fully integrated power dialer and our amazing mobile apps, it means wherever you are, you can make more calls, log to Podio, send more texts, log to Podio, and close more deals, all logged to your Podio CRM. Click the link. Check it out. Nice.
So, and see, there again, you're avoiding that human error issue. Like I can't. The last thing any employee wants to hear from another employee is, Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. So you take away that ability for people to actually forget. You can't. It's gonna, the system, the clock and the system's gonna run. It's gonna do it regardless, and you're gonna get alerted. So there's not, and it's really important in my type of business, as you can imagine. Everybody's catastrophic.
Now, just I want to follow up on something there, because we, talking about employee error and things like that, which always happens, and there's a potential for that everywhere. But if I zero into your employees, how was the Podio accept, the journey to getting everybody accepting Podio? I mean, new people are never really an issue, because if you've never worked in the company and you've never used the other systems, then you're sort of like, well, I guess this is a system I got to learn, and that's all there is to it. But was, from a transitioning point of view for your employees as well, was it difficult? Was it relatively easy? I mean, in general, what was the feeling and acceptance of it?
Well, it seems like a whole lifetime ago, right? I don't remember life before Joel. And when I say that, is that life before Joel was more of a, it was really more of a one-dimensional system opposed to multifaceted. So Podio had so much depth and directions that our trust administration system before was just doing admin, okay? So if I look at Podio now, I have workspaces that are client administration, trust administration, my board, analytics, monitoring, oversight, comms, operations, third-party workspaces. So we didn't have anywhere near, not even remotely, that scope and depth. We had a complex extranet that was just for trust administration that interfaced with banks, but it was just one dimension, right? You just did requests and checks and you stored it there. So when people switched to Podio, I think the only thing that surprised them was, oh, guess what? We have another new app. Oh, we have another new app. Oh, by the way, we're automating scheduling. Oh, by the way, we're going to pre-read your emails and populate them directly to the appropriate client. Oh, by the way, all your calls are automatically going to link to your client. So we didn't have, I don't think anybody in our company's ever complained about Podio. What they've really more complained about is, hey, they get excited and they realize, hey, you think Joel could do this? You think Joel could do that? And the reality is, most times the answer is yes. There's some version of a yes. The bad part is that, Joel, how many open tech tickets do you think we're carrying at a time? 30, 40?
Yeah. We're up to about 30 at the moment. There's just a bunch of, the thing is that, the nice thing again is that Podio is dynamic enough that like our priorities shift. In other words, we worked a lot on the wellness check in the last week, but if something changes dynamically within the business, we shift our focus immediately to, so I'm shifting between, fixing a bug or a problem or a system, a reality induced issue, right? So to something else, to developing new features, and it kind of seamlessly goes back and forth where we're working on those different types of things. I think as people realize, you get that, what I like to call the Podio aha moment. So, thinking back to the beginning, I know that one of the things that everyone was just floored by is I convinced the banking institution at the time that we started this to participate in Podio. And this was before API and anything else. And instead of sending them faxes, we put something up on Podio, we mentioned them. But the thing that was huge was that they would then change a status from acknowledged to funded. And all of a sudden it changed the whole world, where data that they'd never in the past, if someone called up and said, did that check get released? Did that get paid? Did the check clear? They'd have to send an email. They'd have to wait for a response. Now they didn't need to do that. Now they just looked at the request, looked at the funding, the payment, and if the payment said funded, it was funded. And if it said cleared, it meant that it cleared the bank. And they're like, oh, this is a game changer, because now they had that information like firsthand.
And Joel, it's funny you mentioned that, though, because that at-mention thing is something that needs to be clarified. I think, in this age of people using Slack and iMessage and WhatsApp, it's so wonderful that that's another thing, that you have an internal messaging system within Podio that can be less intrusive in interrupting. So I'm always surprised by that. So we use a plethora of tools to communicate so you reduce distractions for your employees. So for example, our staff know that you only do a Podio message, meaning the instant messenger built into Podio. You only do that if you need an urgent response and you're going to interrupt somebody's workflow. But you can be anywhere within any app, anywhere in the system, at any date, time, and age, and you can hit the @ symbol on your keyboard and type in the name of your fellow employee, and you can send them an instant message that goes up into notices but doesn't interrupt them. And they can review them twice a day and say, oh, here's what's going on. The other thing that's shocking to me about Podio, because my job is so dangerous legally, that I can literally look at the Globy inbox and I see the actions and activity of everybody within the organization in snapshots, and I can jump to and fro from there so that you have a central repository that gives you a window, a shot of an organization. Imagine we're an organization with 90 apps, 12 workspaces, and in an instant, I can be in one place and jump around to any of that and not even have to know which app or where it is. It's directly linked. Everything's URL based. That's the other thing that blows my mind about Podio is I can share anything just by copying the URL. I mean, you know, a lot of programs tend to close out people from getting in unless you're paying a license fee. Podio is just the opposite. I feel like it makes the door open, but it's still secure. And that's very unusual in the CRM space.
Well, and picking up on your app mention point, one of the things I've always felt is really powerful, and you mentioned Slack. I personally hate Slack. We use it in smartphone internally, and it's fine for chatting to people. It's no problem, but it suffers from that, you know, that forever scroll back to find something problem, right? Because
Yes.
it's not threaded, and it's threaded, but it's not a contextual.
It's not contextual. Yeah, no context.
And one of the things I've always sort of encouraged people to really understand about Podio is with the @ mentions on things, you can contain conversations on the things they relate to, as opposed to just chatting about things back and forth. You know, I'm talking about this customer or this claim or this, whatever it is, and we've got the messages and the back and forth contained on it. And that is huge for being able to, for being able to see the history and zero in on what you care about, not have to forever, fucking scroll back, 18 months to find that one message that relates to the things you are talking about. And that's where Podio, I think, in the @ mentioning on the items is just, it's the only way to fly, in my opinion.
Well, the only thing I think is hard, especially using a podcast or even a video, I think contextually it's very hard for people to grasp the scale of what we're saying, even in this podcast. When I tell people that, and even if I show a person, it takes a little while, and then the light comes on, and they look at our system, and they're like, "Oh my God, how would you do that?" Right? So I think there's a lot of software out there in the industry that I'll call it eye candy. And they'll make the parts that are pretty that the people think they want the most, but there's not that much depth to the product. So they don't realize the box that they're boxed in. A good example would be like Salesforce. You start at this level, and every time you add, it's ka-ching, 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 and next thing you know, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can't even afford to run my business. I get too much money tied up in my CRM systems and my related collateral programs. So in Citrix Podio, the more you use it, the more you realize there's more you can do with it. It doesn't get old, and the depth seems to keep getting deeper and deeper. And then, there's a lot of creativity and uniqueness that I have never seen anywhere else.
100%. I 100% agree. I hope Citrix listens to this, because they've struggled for a decade to understand how to position Podio. They've tried to position it as a CRM, but then people log in and they're like, "Where's my CRM?" Oh, you got to build it. Shit. They've tried to position it as a project management tool, and people go, "Great, where's my Asana boards?" You got to build it. Shit. But to your point, all the various parts of your business, every one of our businesses touches so many things, from HR to finance to sales and customer and support, and whatever it is, we touch a lot of different things, and there is never been a one-stop solution that works. And Podio is that solution because you can build it exactly how you work. And it sounds like what you guys have managed to achieve is, and is continuing to evolve and get better and better and better and better, is a good case point for, the power of taking a business and building, all those little bits so that the staff can seamlessly run their day-to-day, and they've got automation, they've got workflow, they've got all the data at their fingertips, and they're not wasting time jumping around trying to find things. And that's, sounds like you've done that very successfully.
I think one of the things also that's interesting is that, in management, we talk about that a good business runs on really clear organizational clarity. You know who's responsible for what, you know who to turn to in any circumstance. Podio promotes that sort of organizational clarity because you can go to a record and say, okay, I know who I look at this record's connected to this client. This client has a trust officer of this person. It has a junior assistant of this person. Okay, I now know. So like when our outside financial institution, which is in one workspace, looks at a payment request and has an issue with it, they just look at the bottom. They can see the trust officer's name. They can mention the trust officer and say, hey, there's something wrong with this payment, or this payment returned to us with something odd on it. That organizational clarity that is both in the context and can be referenced by a member field makes all the difference. So Podio is not just it's not a CRM, it's not a project management tool. It is a business tool. It is a enterprise level business tool that really makes it possible for a company to clarify, and then by putting the good process and procedures around it through the tool, you can really successfully run your business, optimize your business.
And I Joel, not that I love that. Imagine this, just think about this statement for a second. You're talking about a software that I pay almost the same money as when I started 4 years ago. Now in 2022, I'm spending the same money, give or take maybe a couple $1,000 total for the year. And I've increased the capacity and functionality of Podio probably 100-fold. Now think about that. There's no other platform where you're not going to be running up an enormous amount of extra costs. So we took something that started off with say 20, 30 apps to 90 and use it to run our HR, project management, finances, banking, accounting, anything you can imagine in your business. And yet none of those things increase my cost, except Joe.
At 1,000 hours.
And you know what's neat? Joel's never increased his cost to us either the whole time. Shh.
That may change after this podcast hits. No, I listen. I mean, I'm so great. I think this is such a great example of both a relatively complex business being able to build itself into Podio and then expand. I think it's such a great use case. Just to close out as a closing thought, you mentioned obviously finance. You mentioned in terms of add-ons. You've got ProcFu, I'm guessing, Joel.
Yep.
What are the core add-ons if there's right signature or e-signature tools or anything like that you use as well in your Podio that you've been able to integrate into your workflow very well?
So the ProcFu definitely because we use it for not only the scripts and for some functionality there, but we use it a lot now for many apps to allow clients to access stuff. We are using we use Calendly for scheduling, and through the API it comes in, and then that allows us to line stuff up. Right signature is there's a lot of contract work that is at the front side, at the lead in the creation. We're in an early phase with right signature, but we were able to create something pretty basic, pretty simple that allows them to set up their document and then get it off for electronic signature. So that initiative is growing, but it's definitely there. And also the cost entry point for that was really relatively good. They're using ShareFile as well, because there's they had a lot of documents. They have
Very
highly
sensitive
sensitive
documents.
stuff. So they were a great candidate for ShareFile because we're creating stuff. The system is actually backed up twofold at this point. We're using Momentum tools. We use Momentum tools both for the tools portion, for the Power Tools portion, but we also, the system's backed up by that, but we are also backed up by TechEgo's Sync, which we use for stuff. We have a DigitalOcean SQL server, which is helping the mini app. So, I mean, there's a host of little things of systems that are out there that we're interacting with. It's grown over time as the bang for your buck has worked, but it is definitely an evolving thing that is done. And like I said, the API game, this is something that you sort of need a partner to help with, but like just that Calendly API is priceless. Yes, anyone can take an email in and then have a staff employee, schedule the thing. But having Calendly bring it in and let it put it on the calendar, and then it reaches out and it updates the lead and it updates the this or the this is very valuable to have those things work. We have a little, we're using Intergrammat for just one little thing because we're making a connection to Google Gmail for Will. Will has a need to, because he uses certain accessibility tools on his iPhone. So we do a little extra work for him with syncing some Google Calendar events for him and using that. But I mean, like I said, each piece to a purpose. API calls to our different financial institutions, them calling stuff to us and querying us. It makes it really, really very powerful. And like I said, it's a constantly evolving and being tweaked and optimized, and new features being added all the time.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Sounds fantastic. And I'm going to point out, because I'm contractually obligated to, you also use smartphone.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that.
I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, Joel, two fucking logos here, man. Come on, man.
Well, I'll say this. We are they on the smartphone side. I like to say when I'm showing clients this smartphone, they're one of the biggest because they're a customer relation system. So they're constantly on the phone. Their phone calls are a big part of it. Everything is recorded because they have a requirement to maintain all of the audio. In fact, after so much time, we pull the audio off and store it in Podio, which is I think not a lot of people do that particular trick. They store it off to some other system. I actually store it in Podio to allow that to go. But it's really interesting how they've actually revamp the communication app because they actually look at whether a call is done or not. So even if there's a missed call, somebody's going in there looking at that missed call and has to mark it as done. They have disposition statuses for smartphones. So if you answer a call, you can say answered, you can say answered and done, or you can say answered and I need something more done with this, so that those disposition statuses trigger other flows. So they're actually creating a tremendous amount of volume through the smartphone system. At one time, you had how many people, Will, in the office that were all operating out of the same room on smartphone? Pre-COVID?
Yeah, we had 12 at one time. And the other thing with smartphone that I thought, Joel, is that imagine if you told attorneys and people when you're marketing this that they can keep their own cell phone and never have to give it out. See, I love dialing everything from a smartphone app and nobody has to get my cell number. And you can't understate that. The other thing too is imagine you're a company and I have 12,000 contacts. So when I use my smartphone, I just start typing the person's name and bada bing, bada boom, they pop up and you go, oh, that's easy. And then it says, okay, which one do you want? Do you want to send a text? Do you want to call their home? Do you want to call their office? Those functionalities even exceed this general functionality in the iPhone. If you think about it, you're opening a smartphone app that literally is looking at your contact all database of everybody in your business that you've been running for 25 years. I mean, that's unbelievable. And then I can keep logs and track and even add notes right then live while I'm talking to that source. in my smartphone app, and it's posting it to the record. So I can't, I think smartphone was one of those real nice, huge enhancements to our Podio system when once it was refined a little. So I'm very much in love with smartphone.
No, that's great. I also, to your point, one of the things I always tell people when they're when I, if a business is like, oh, I'm not sure about moving my phone system on, online, because some are, some businesses are just a bit wary. If they've never used a cloud phone system, they're a bit wary, and I understand that. But I always say, look, you got 20 employees. How nice will it be to never have to worry about, buying them a phone anymore, about them, taking having all your contacts on their iPhone, which they can just download and or speak to regardless. How nice will it be if you have to work from home because a pandemic hits, that nobody drops an inch of a second? Because I remember people were sending IP phones to people, when they were using Ring Central or these systems. And, with smartphone, you just like, man, just open your browser or pick up your mobile phone. The app's there. So there's a lot of value around that, around not having an infrastructure there that you have to develop, I think.
Well, also for Will, the context is killer because, we've got, not only is it a litigious business for him, he's dealing with a ton of attorneys, right? Every client has one, if not two attorneys involved in the circumstance, right? So we sometimes get situations where people are like, I've been calling for 3 days, I have a whatever. Well, we have every phone call logged. I mean, even if you hang up, we have the call logged. And if you talk to anyone, we have the call recorded. So, it's very easy to track where failures are happening or if they are indeed really happening. I remember there was an incident, we had somebody who called and was like, I've been, and I'm like, and Will would work with me in the sessions as much during that time. And I was like, wait, look here. I'm like, look at this. And I'm like, does he have any other phone number? There was no other phone number. It's like, we looked, the calls were just not there. And Will got on the phone and he said, I'm happy to get this resolved for you. I see you called 3 days ago once and didn't leave a message, and we're happy to do this and deal with this. But I'm really concerned. I know I've got my developer. We only see the one call, and you said you've been calling for 3 days, and then the guy kind of admitted he was exaggerating massively. But it is useful to have that track and information. It also is useful for us to optimize. Kate and I will spend time occasionally optimizing what staff is doing by looking at call flow, looking who's answering the calls, looking how stuff is moving. It's not just about, okay, now you control your phone system. It's that you gain this information and into the context of what records, who's doing it, not only what contact, but what record is that related to, because we add that piece in so that we know a lot more about communication. I mean, it goes back to that wellness check, as I mentioned. It's like one of the factors I'm checking, okay, there has to be a phone call, it has to have been outbound or inbound and answered, or it has to be an inbound text from the right phone numbers. That qualifies it out of a wellness check, because that sets the date that I've heard from them. You couldn't do that with in fact, I'm not sure you could do that with any other telephone system, because without the disposition status of answered, because I've had clients who tried to use some system other than smartphone, right? And I'm like, yeah, but how do I know that you answered this call? How do I know that it wasn't just a voicemail or something else? That doesn't count. I need to know that there was communication. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said. In fact, I remember at one point, the disposition buttons disappeared from one point of view. And I'm like, hold it, wait, this is the biggest single feature of smartphone are these disposition buttons. It's like no one else has that. Oh, so it's huge.
Well, Joel, I always feel like it saves our bacon all the time because it allows me to know for sure. I can't tell you how many times a client or person says, well, your people didn't call me back. Well, I just pull up the log and I go, they tried to call you 4 times. Here's the times. Oh, well, my voicemail's not set up. Okay, well, then stop telling your attorney that we're not following up and keeping up with you because you're not answering your phone. So if anything, it's probably saved us more from customer service problems and allows us to have quality customer service because smartphone gave us a feature to say, oh, I see you called. I just did this yesterday. I said, ma'am, you called us 9 times. You got to give us 24 hours to call back, and calling 9 times doesn't help, and leaving 9 messages doesn't help. Yeah. So we use it very much. Our communication logs with smartphone in our Podio is like our lifesaver. I can't imagine anybody doing high volume call work where they wouldn't benefit from that type of system.
Well, mental note, do not change the way dispositions work in Podio, or Joel and Will fly over and beat me to death. So that's fair. Good point. All right. I've made that note now. That's good. Well, listen, guys, I got to say, I so much appreciate, I think the story is fantastic. Both, obviously the journey into Podio, but also how much Podio has broadened into your organization, and how much you are now seeing the great, even more opportunities. I think that's fantastic. I think it also shows a real value in working with a good partner, where that partnership of you guys wanting business ends and Joel being able to help you guys meet it. I think this illustrates very, very, very well. I'm just going to give you guys the last word. If you have any last thoughts, and or let people know, obviously you're a very specific case. You're not going to be cold calling, selling to people through the podcast, but I will drop your website link into the podcast, of course, so people can see it. But just final thoughts, and just let people know how you can find both you and Joel.
So let's do this. I'm going to promote Will, and I'll let Will promote me as a little bit of a change.
All right, well, go hit it.
So let's say this CPT. So if you have a situation, if you do law, if you're a lawyer who deals with cases and has need of a fiduciary trust company, as a charity, CPT, at really low fees, with excellent customer service, with people who really care, that is not a profit targeted company. They really work very, very hard. I've learned more about Will's business from working with him, and how hard they work to be the right sort of company for their beneficiaries, and also truly as because that's only a part of what they do. The other part is to educate attorneys. And I've been on calls and listened to Will work with attorneys. This is a very complicated point of law, and Will is the subject matter expert. He knows more about these things and can help lawyers really do an excellent job for their clients. So if you know anybody who's in this sort of circumstance where a trust is needed, CPT is always worth checking with. It will always be, I think, the best choice for you.
All right.
Thank you, Joel. And I want to say that most importantly, I can't, and I know this sounds strange and corny, I can't imagine my life without Joel's influence. He's profoundly changed the way we operate. And having a Podio partner that joins the journey and has such a granular, intimate relationship with a business partner at this level, you don't see that with other products and services. It just doesn't exist. I mean, everybody that meets Joel thinks he actually is one of our employees, and it's like, no, he's been a vendor supporting us for years. The only thing I only want to caution anybody about Podio is, you have to have patience, because you get to make this exactly what you want it to be. But you're not buying a thing out of the box. You're basically buying one hell of a foundation that you can turn into whatever the hell you want. And with a good Podio developer like Joel, the sky's the limit. You just have to know to ask, and you'd be surprised what someone can create and do for you.
I couldn't ask for a better sum up of both Joel and Podio, as I've known Joel for years. So both of you gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and on telling a bit about your journey. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys continue to thrive together. So thank you so much.
You bet.
You've been listening to another awesome episode of Supercharged with Jordan Samuel Fleming. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to be notified of new podcast episodes, Podio masterclasses, and in-depth Podio extension reviews. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a review on your podcast player to help support the show.